16 of my ancestors on the Mayflower, as president number 2 and 6, as our grandfathers of mine. You can feel good about the top-down mission of like fixing governance and trying to innovate and dealing with what we've seen as being so broken in the West. Sure. And then you have the bottom-up mission of basically lifting millions of people out of poverty. And in 2020, I had come off of like a wave of exits and changes in my life, and I decided I want to work on something new. I don't want to rely on the idea that taxation is the right revenue model for government, but I think we should be able to innovate on that. I made a short list of biggest problems facing humanity and decided that number one is our rubbish governments, is China. They literally had to copy the US model in order to become what they are today.
Welcome, Bradford. Thank you for being here for the first of, I think, what will probably end up being annual art firesides, which is a network state conference. Before we dive into what you were speaking about on stage yesterday and Arthur Cities, I'd love to start with more about you, but do you just want to start by giving a very, very brief overview of, I guess, of who you are and what you're working on at the moment?
Sure. So hi everyone, I'm Bradford, and my background is as a computer scientist and finance guy, actually, over the course of about the past couple of decades. I worked in AI from about 99 until 2020. So I'm kind of an AI OG, and I did the first AI startup in Y Combinator in 2009, for example. I'm one of the founding partners of DCVC, which was the first kind of big data and AI VC that's become like a $4 billion platform over the years, and it evolved into deep tech from like nuclear, bio, and all kinds of cool stuff. So I'm kind of a Silicon Valley guy who comes from a tech world and spent my career doing deep tech stuff. And then in 2020, I had come off of like a wave of exits and changes in my life, and I decided I want to work on something new, and especially something that's not so abstract and math and computer sciencey, but something that's more in the world of bits and something that touches people's lives more directly. And so I spent some time, did like a think week, and I was like, I need to do my like Elon pivot into the world of atoms. What should I work on? And I made a short list of biggest problems facing humanity and decided that number one is our rubbish governments. So and I was like, let me work on this. And I had some friends in crypto that were, of course, interested in these types of ideas because it's baked into the very foundations conceptually of what crypto is about. Talked to Balaji. Balaji connected me to Patri, who is my partner with Pronomos Capital, who had already raised from some, Silicon Valley legends to invest in startup cities around the world. And I was like, okay, I've helped build funds before. I'll help you build the fund and learn about the space. Because I wanted to kind of come in humbly to the space as a person who comes from a very different kind of a background and environment and set of industries. I was like, I don't want to come in, cocky and arrogant and just try to do stuff right away when I have no idea what I'm doing. So I spent a few years working with Patri, investing in companies, helping founders, etc. And then finally, we found the right opportunity for me to start incubating and CEOing something and building Alpha, which is what I lead now. And that's basically a federation or network of startup cities around the world, starting in Africa. First Lusophone Africa, then Anglophone Africa. And then we're looking at projects now in Brazil and US and other places as well.
Amazing. So in that brief 2-minute introduction, there's about 6 days worth of content to pack into.
There's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, again, I would first love to dive into a little bit more about you. Where did you actually grow up? Where are you from?
I grew up in Maine, which is a beautiful place and has the largest forest cover of any state in the U.S. except maybe Alaska. It's like 90+% covered by forest, and it's just a beautiful place. So I grew up with a very strong affinity for nature and stuff. And then I went to school down in Southwest Virginia at Virginia Tech for undergrad, and spent 5 years in Miami Beach, which I loved, before Miami had this renaissance now. So back then, when I lived in Miami, it was everyone was hot, which was awesome. but there was no like intellectual and industrial stuff really going on. Just hot. It was just hotness. It was just hotness and selling shit into Latin America. That's where a lot of people put their Latin America headquarters, right? Because this was the early 2000s, and like, you still didn't really trust the Latin American countries, so nobody wanted to put their headquarters in any of them, even including the Latin American companies. Still would put it in Miami. So you had Latin American headquarters, sales offices to sell into Latin America, and lots of hot people, models, artists, etc. So it was very fun, very creative. But ultimately I was like, intellectually wanting, and it was very clear I should move out to Silicon Valley where everyone was going at the time. And also I should say that, when I started doing AI stuff, there wasn't yet this modern internet scale data that we have now, which unlocked a huge pivot. Many people don't remember these days, but back in the day, you actually went into either high frequency physics or trading. Those were the only two domains where all the smart computer scientists that were working on machine learning and stuff would go.
What did you study at the GTM?
Computer science. Okay. Yeah. And finance, both. I never graduated, but I had like under 10 credits away from 5 different majors. So it was just computer science, finance, econ, math.
So to be clear, you flopped, you dropped out.
I had like almost a 4.0 GPA, and then I just like stopped at the end. Actually, technically what I did was I created a hedge fund and set myself up an internship at my own hedge funds, so I didn't have to start repaying my student loans. And then I just never went back. Just kept doing the hedge fund. But eventually, like once, Google was really taking off around like '02, it was like very clear that all the smart people were going to pivot to internet from like finance and stuff, right? And so everybody was moving to Silicon Valley, where especially at Google, at the time, like they had everybody, like all the smartest people were at Google for like several years, probably like 5 to 10 years. It was like insane being there. It was the most humbling and inspiring experience of my life, like being at Google and it's like epic heyday. Patri was there as well at a similar time. So yeah, then I was out there and I started to do graduate school at Berkeley. I was going to do a PhD in AI. That was actually when I was founding the first AI startup in YC. I was also starting to do a PhD in AI.
Because what year was that?
That was 2009.
So is that like literally like the first?
That was the first AI startup in YC.
And is that like the second cohort of
YC started in 04, I believe, in Boston. But this was like I think it was one of the first few cohorts in Silicon Valley. When they relocated out to Silicon Valley, and I was like in one of the first or second or something like that classes. So it was like right around the time of, Airbnb and Dropbox and all that kind of stuff was being founded. So that was an amazing experience as well, because we were working very directly with Paul Graham. I'm a Lisp guy, so like I like Lisp and functional programming a lot. So this company was also built in Lisp in Clojure, and so Paul loved it. He would come and look over my shoulder all the time, and like while I was coding and the things and stuff. So it was great to have that experience. And I was blessed to be in Silicon Valley at the right place at the right time. To have learned at Google when I did, to have learned at YC when I did. I mean, that's part of what inspired me to take this on, is that that place really gave me everything I had. I would not be the man I am, and I would not have the success I have without having been able to learn from all these amazing legends. And then to see it just get completely trashed by bad government, it really angered me. Like, it broke my heart and it made me enraged. And I was like, we need to fix this shit. Like, government matters. We can't just ignore this anymore. Like, they'll ruin everything.
So just feel like I'd even get back to like all the hot people in Miami, right? Like
going back to the hot people in Miami, we need to keep the focus on the important topic.
But it's part of the same theme, right? So the reason all the hot people in Miami, or at least the reason Miami is the capital of South America, is again, it's a problem of governance. So here is a repercussion of bad governance. Everybody else is on the side, right? So it's this that's theme through all of this.
Yeah, I mean, like the bedrock of Miami is the Cuban community, which came over, and like all the, there's a ton of amazing Cuban talent that they just bounced, after Castro came to power. So that was like a huge boon to building Miami up. Like all the smart business people and smart technical people, doctors, lawyers, all the whole professional class evacuated Cuba and came to Miami. And so that was a core part of the foundation of it. So you're exactly right. Miami is built by the fact that there was tons of bad governance around in Latin America.
I mean, I guess so did some YC stuff, doing some early AI, ML, sort of like startups, programming with Paul Graham with Lisp.
Yeah.
And then sort of like move from startups into the venture side of stuff with DCVC.
I was doing that like as a moonlighting thing.
Okay.
Right. I'm a high bandwidth person, so I'm able to manage like a lot of stuff at the same time. In fact, if I don't do that, I start going completely crazy. Same with like working out. Like I work out 2-3 hours a day. If I don't do that, I become like a complete lunatic. And like I have a hair trigger temper, and I'm like just awful. I'm an awful human being unless I work out a lot. And it's the same with work. Like if I require like to be fully saturated by stimulation, and if I'm not, like I'll just lose my shit. So I had to, kind of to get into that because honestly, we were running something called the Data Drinking Group at the time. So at the very beginning of like the data and AI movement in Silicon Valley, created this meetup where we would just get together at the bar every week or two with a whole bunch of geniuses. And it was all like entrepreneurs, AI researchers, and CTOs, as well as a lot of the top academics at Stanford and Berkeley. And we would all get together and just drink and talk about machine learning, basically. And
What year is this?
that was started in like, I guess probably 2006 or 7. So something like that. It was pretty early. So this is why I have such an amazing deep network in that space, because like, I have very intimate relationships with people from way back in the day. And we all respect each other a lot and have been, we're sticking with this shit when nobody else cared, right? Like it was not sexy to be at this meetup. Treska, this is like the geekiest shit that you can imagine. So it's not cool. It's not like going to the crypto parties after token 2040. I
mean, that's cool. So is the other side.
there was no Diplo wasn't there at these parties, right? So we were like, just talking about geek shit. And eventually what we realized, because more and more of us were wanting to do startups, like there was nobody to back these startups. Like the VCs were so incompetent about deep technology at the time. And it was not like sexy to do. Ironically, it's called Silicon Valley because it started with deep tech. It started with semiconductors, but they had really lost that by the time that we were there in the mid 2000s. It was all about internet, like pretty trivial, like internet consumer services that, the world needed to build, but technically were not that complicated until they were scaled up. Then even Facebook and social networks become incredibly complicated once they're scaled up. But when you're prototyping an app, like the V1 of Instagram is trivial to build.
Yeah.
Instagram at its current scale, this is just completely non-trivial to operate, but that was not the case at the beginning. So the VCs, they were used to diligencing stuff like that. They didn't really have the capability to diligence or invest in these types of projects. And so many of us got more and more frustrated by that, going up and down Sand Hill Road trying to raise money for our projects from people that had no clue about it. And so we were like, we need to build a VC for this. So the VC was born out of the Data Drinking Group. And that was the first major investor in that space. So it's kind of cool because now I've been part of Pronomos, which was like the first major investor in this space. This is my second rodeo with this stuff. It's fun. I prefer to be on like the pioneering side. I like it. When I started working with Patry, everybody thought that this was completely crazy. It's not like now, we go to the network state thing, people come up and like accost us with all these questions after our talks and stuff. And it's so trippy because like 5 years ago, and this guy's been working on that shit for like 20 years, like seasteading and everything. That was like really considered lunacy. There's been articles written about how much of a lunatic this guy is.
I mean, they're true, right?
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. Both can be true. They can be smart and up to
Smart, correct. Right, but there's plenty of those people that are really right.
absolutely. I mean, you need to be a little bit crazy, right, to do this type of stuff where it's not clear to everyone else and everybody's telling you it's insane. And
So let's go to this point. Yeah, exactly that, right? Like and again, you had some success and you were like, okay, need to work out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. Just talk a little bit more about in that detail about like why you ended up, reaching out, speaking with Balaji, getting introduced to him, to Patri, joining Pronomos. I talk a little bit about that sort of, I guess, the mental model that you were using to make those decisions.
yeah, well, I knew that this was the idea I want to work it on, like this idea of revolutionizing government. And I had been thinking about this actually for a very, very long time because my family history has a lot of this in the U.S. Like I'm named after William Bradford, who was the governor of Plymouth Plantation. I had 16 of my ancestors on the Mayflower. Both of the two John Adamses are grandfathers of mine, so that's president number 2 and 6. And my grandmother was the one who was like completely obsessed with the family tree and used to constantly get this into me that there was this legacy and tell me that one day I was going to be the president and all this stuff. It like revitalized the name of the family because we had been, just drunks for several generations before me. So she's like, you need to, take it back to the glory days, right?
Yeah.
And you're the guy. And so I was like, fuck, this is a lot of pressure. I just want to do computer science stuff. But I guess maybe like she infected me. I came back to it. But like, it's just like I saw how important this was, and I also saw how complicated this was, and I really wanted to do it. I didn't want to just do some theoretical project. I wanted to really build competitive governments that can really force and put pressure on other governments to change, right, by showing how much better it can be and really stealing their smartest citizens away. And I was like, if I want to do this, I got to take it seriously. And I'm a people person. I need to talk to people who know what they're doing and are smarter than me about certain things. And so I started to collect different people that have different, backgrounds and capabilities and networks and stuff. And I first started talking to Balaji. I had this idea called Internet of State back in the day, prior to when he came up with the network state thing that we were talking about. The point that I had was different, which was that I had built AI companies in areas like banking and pharma and stuff. So I have a lot of experience in highly regulated industries. And what I saw was that there's already like international standardization for the regulations in a lot of these kinds of industries. So like, for example, if you develop a drug in the US or in Japan, there's massive genetic differences between the populations. So there's like well-established, practices and processes for translating the results of medical research and what you can and can't do and so on. And the regulators collaborate, right? And it's the same in banking, right? In fintech and so on. You have all the anti-money laundering stuff that everyone has to follow. You don't have to follow it, but then no other bank is going to accept any wires.
Yep.
So you're treated as an invalid counterparty, and that's kind of pointless in the modern global economy. So you have to follow the rules to plug in.
Yep.
So looking at that, I was like, this is kind of like it's like the internet. You have these protocols, right, which you have to follow. As long as you implement the protocol correctly and follow it, then you can plug in, right? And so I was like, this is kind of cool because now it gives us the opportunity to decentralize the state. And I think a lot of the big problems in the world today are from these big monolithic nation states like the US and China and stuff, and Russia. Like they just become very power hungry. Like the bigger they get, the more you have this elite political class that wants to project power, threaten people with violence, get involved in a bunch of bullshit. And if you look at the kind of states that function, in my opinion, better and show an example of what we should be doing, it's kind of like UAE and Singapore, right? Where it's like, let's just build an economic powerhouse and make our people rich, right? That's what government should be doing. Make it safe and make it possible for people to move up the economic ladder and have wealth and send their kids to a better school and have a better life. That's the basics of what a society should be. Not engaged in all kinds of power politics and drama about social issues that they should even be talking about and stuff. And so I was like, this idea of like protocolizing some of the core parts of government so that we have standards that we can all agree to, like this is the best practice for doing a certain thing, is actually great, right? In that sense, the like regulation, which a lot of people that are more libertarian think is always bad. It doesn't always have to be bad. And centralized regulation in the form of like of almost like a protocol level thing can be something that enables a ton of decentralization. We can pull apart the power that's been centralized in these big states and kind of, federate it out into a whole bunch of smaller states, which is easier to manage. A lot of times I use a corporate example where it's like, I mean, if you've built startups and you've also worked in a big company and you've been through growth phases, so you see, what does it look like with 10 people and 100 and 1,000 and 10,000 and 100,000 employees, right? At 10 people, it's awesome. It's so fun, right? You get to 100, you start having problems. Get to 1,000, you start having more problems. Once you get between 1,000 and 10,000, the company sucks. Like, it doesn't matter like what company it is. It's just really hard to manage like people at that scale, and you end up getting all kinds of bureaucracy. You get like bad actors that want to accumulate power for themselves and build their fiefdom instead of like thinking about the greater mission of the company, and just stuff creeps in, and it's so hard to fight against that inertia, and they become like these bloated, horrible corporate monoliths.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, that you can't even manage 10,000 people in the company when you have basically like dictatorial powers as the CEO to do whatever the fuck you want, well, then how are we going to manage a country of 250 million people or 1.5 billion people? Like, that seems implausible. Right? So I think we need to think about that and be like, okay, there's a, decentralization and empowering, smaller states is really the only way that you're going to be able to make states that function better. And if you look at it, I think the biggest case study that proves my point is China. They literally had to copy the US model in order to become what they are today.
Oh, it's called it the UK model. Or the UK, like with Hong Kong.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I think it's the greatest thing that the UK have done, right, is building Hong Kong and then China replicating that across the whole of their east coast to basically bring 500 million people out of poverty.
Exactly. Yeah.
That was all the UK's doing.
Yeah, it was all. It all traces back to Rome. At the end of the day, yeah. That is why even if you look at all our political buildings, they had the Roman columns and everything, right? It's like, and the British, yeah, and it's like the British are basically part Roman, right? And then they went over to the U.S. and then that became the Rome 3.0, and then China copied, and then that's the Asian Rome, and it's like, it's all Roman at the end of the day. All roads lead to Rome, as they say, right? So yeah, but you're right. It's like we keep learning and evolving and getting better at it. Yeah.
So then maybe again, like to just touch on a bit more. So again, you knew you wanted to work in this space. I'd love to dive into that even more as well. But again, you thought, okay, the best way to start doing that was to start working from Patrick Pronomos.
Yeah.
And again, taking that point of humility and learning and listening. I guess I'm very interested again on how your experience was at Pronomos, and then how Alpha came out of that, and you knew that this was the thing, and this was the right moment and the right time, then the thing to work on.
Yeah. I mean, the learnings we've had from Pronomos have been tremendous. We've had such a broad set of different portfolio companies taking different approaches to try to attack this problem.
And maybe just for people that have not or don't know what Pronomos is, right? This was a sort of an early stage venture fund that was set up by Patrick Friedman to invest in charter cities, new city projects, something along this line, and was just like specialized in doing this. And that was founded when, Patrick?
First of December 2019.
2019. Okay, fine. And then you joined shortly after, I guess.
I can't remember what year it was. The year. So I think 2020. But wasn't that one? Was that?
Sorry, continue.
And then, like Padre had already done some really interesting deals, and then we did some more together. And I helped with some of the CEOs a lot at the beginning, trying to see like what they were struggling with and help as much as I could. And I started developing pretty strong opinions about, what types of founders are well equipped to attack this versus not, what type of approaches seem to make sense versus not, what type of jurisdictions seem like good partner countries for doing this kind of thing. Really everything that I do has been informed by what we've learned from Pronomos. Some of the key projects like Prospera especially, which is one of the main ones been around for the longest, we've just learned an enormous amount. And Patri and some of the others in the ecosystem have learned even more than I have, because it's been, when did they start working on the ZA stuff? It was like 10 years.
It was 11.
right?
Overnight, the first demo year.
And wasn't there like a predecessor like ZED?
It was their Zenez in 2011, and then the Supreme Court struck it down in 2012, and they modified it past weekends and Zetas.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until 2017 that they actually got the program running, and we're starting Blended Fruit Prosper brought rail their hand to finish and launch it.
Yeah. So it's really built on the shoulders of giants, as they say, right? Like we've learned so much from everything that they've done. And like even our zone law, like we have a templatized like zone law for Alpha, and it's authored by Tom Bell, who was like this OG kind of legal expert in the space, and he worked on the ZA stuff along with a bunch of other people. He's been involved in Pronomos since the beginning. Again, it's like I'm not a legal guy, so I would have been completely hopeless to figure something like that out if I had to figure that out on my own from scratch without having the expertise that had been gathered over a decade by all these really smart people. There's no way in hell that would be where I'm at with Alpha, right? Like a huge part of why we've been able to move so quickly is just, using building blocks that other people have come up with over the years, and then learning from what has worked and what hasn't worked, and avoiding what hasn't worked is very important, right? Like that's one of the biggest things that a lot of people fail to do, right? Is like you can't just learn from your own experiences and failures. You've got to be able to recognize when somebody else has learned from a failure and it's not their fault. If anyone else tries it, they're also going to fail. A lot of people, that's what I mean by coming with a humble mindset. A lot of people come with a cocky mindset. Oh, that person's an idiot. If I do this, it's going to work. And then they just smash their car into a brick wall just like the other person did, right? It's like, no, you just shouldn't drive shit-faced. You're going to crash every time, man.
No, there is a lot of nuance there, though, right? Yeah, there's a lot of nuance in being able to, like, take the right lessons and know which ones are.
No, for sure, because you do have to, it is the case that some people execute a good idea poorly.
Yes.
And you need to be able to recognize what's what, right?
Yep.
But you need to be able, again, like that's something I've been able to do well because I've had so much experience building companies and investing in companies and being around great founders and operators. So I can judge pretty well whether or not a person has the capability to execute something. So I can tell if okay, their execution is pretty solid. It might not be perfect, but most likely this is a problem where if you try the same thing, anyone is going to fail at doing it. So versus it seems like it might be solid. It's not clear, but these people are definitely terrible at execution. So maybe I'll try and experiment and see if I can get it to work because it's hard to trust that data point, right? Because it's been generated by a faulty process. So you do have to be able to tease apart those nuances for sure.
Let's get into Alpha. How did Alpha start?
Well, we were the biggest problem I would say in Pronomos, which I think Patrick would probably agree with, is we've had a dearth of deal flow, like really credible deal flow in the space. So there's just been a lot of people that come into it with a very kind of highfalutin type of approach and not really very practical. And we just were drowning in these types of projects. It's getting a little bit better, but it's still not great. We still see a lot of cockamamie nonsense for sure. So what we decided was okay, now's the time. We should try to build something because there's just not enough good stuff to really deploy capital into. And we were doing some follow-up rounds on some of the things that have done well, but we were having a really hard time to find something that we both could really get excited about to deploy more of the rest of the capital in the fund into. So we're okay, that's one motivator. Is we want to make another big bet, but there isn't a great big bet to make. And then also I had accumulated enough kind of wisdom and confidence over those first few years from watching everything to kind of have a pretty decent thesis about what I thought we should do. And then Patri pointed out that one of our LPs was super connected to people in Portuguese-speaking Africa. This is a guy in Lisbon who's run a business for several decades that does a bunch of construction in all these countries. And so he was yeah, I can broker some intros to a bunch of this political leadership, and you can see, to take the BD role and see what you can do, run with it and see what you can get done. So we started in Sao Tome and Principe. then Guinea-Bissau, Angola, Cabo Verde, all of Portuguese-speaking West Africa initially. And we made great progress, got MOUs signed very quickly, got 3 MOUs done in the first year, and then proceeded quickly into like land concessions and the joint venture agreements and everything else. That, again, the whole infrastructure, like the joint venture agreements we got from how Rendeavor did Alaro City in Nigeria. We allowed one of the founders of Rendeavor to be the only other investor in the pre-seed of Alpha alongside Pronomos, because they had so much experience building cities in Africa. And so I was again like, okay, I want that experience. I want to learn, both building in Africa and the way that they've worked with the governments, the legal structures and so on. And fortunately enough, the guy who's the CEO of Alaro City, who was one of the early founders of Rendeavor, was also their general counsel previously. Before he became CEO of West Africa, he was the general counsel. So he has the most deep, intimate details of all the legal stuff. So again, I'm like, you can see I use this pattern of like, I know where I'm weak. That's one of my greatest strengths, is to be willing to look in the mirror and see my weaknesses and go fill those holes with people that know what they're doing, right? And so I was able to architect that round to get them involved as well, which was key. So the joint venture agreement comes from them. The zone law comes from Tom Bell and all the experience with the ZEDs and his work on UX. And then we just kind of started getting all those balls rolling, where we're doing the zone law and the concession to land concession of JV agreement, where the government basically contributes the land into the venture for their ownership stake in the JV. And we've been moving very fast with that with these first few countries. And then what happened is we started to open up through this network I've been building in Africa over the years. And now we're getting into Anglophone Africa, so Nigeria, Tanzania, Kenya, and there's all kinds of really cool opportunity opening up to us now. Yeah, so that's kind of how it started.
No, it's amazing. Maybe to dive into that then. So like, what with that first ME, was it Sao Tome, Cabo Verde, which was the first?
Sao Tome was the first one, yeah.
So what even, just try and give us an insight even to that conversation. So like, what did you come to Sao Tome with? What was this MOU? What was even being discussed, agreed? Like, what did this look like? Why did they sign? What are they getting involved with?
It was just, you guys know like those one-man bands where there's like the guy and he's like stomping and doing the drums and everything. That's what I came with. Those my God. For the guys, it's like, well, the song sounds all right. Like, the thing that's generating is kind of sketchy, but like.
So after like several years of Pronomos and learning how you do this properly, turn up and sang a song, right?
Well, the thing is this, right? I have done enterprise, like big buck off large enterprise stuff. Actually, like big pharma and big banks, like big huge deals with Pfizer and JP Morgan Chase and stuff. With AI startups that are less than 12 months old.
Yep.
And before AI was like sexy and well accepted, right? So that was hard, honestly. That was very hard. Honestly, it was harder than it has been to get these deals done with the governments.
Yep.
It was because they're like way more professionalized, and there's so many programmatic naysayers, like a procurement guys, all kinds of different executives and IT guys and security guys. So even if you get a champion who's super on board for doing something that's pretty novel, there's tons of other people lined up to shoot it down. So you develop these kind of corporate diplomacy skills to do those kinds of BD deals. And because of that, it has translated very directly in doing this stuff with government. So being able to figure out what's the minimum I need to do to get to the next step with them, right? So I can show them the concept and how it's going to track and manifest. And that's how I was able to get these deals done without having, we seeded this company with 1.6 million USD. And we've operated it for over 2 years, and I still have over $1 million in the bank. So, it's a master class in entrepreneurship because I've just gotten my ass kicked for like 20 years to be able to do this. So like I haven't really made a lot of errors with kind of with on enforced errors, right? So we've minimized how much we spend and how much work we do to convince people that we're able to take it to the next step, right?
Yep.
And so the biggest thing I think that unlocks it with these countries is you have to think about what's in their interest, right? And because I have such a commercial and industrial approach, I start with like an industry master plan for the country. And that the politicians uniformly love in every country. Like if you spend a lot of time researching your country and talking to people in their country to really understand it deeply, and you recommend like, here's what you should be doing as your economic development strategy, and it's really well grounded and makes a ton of sense, everyone's just nodding their head and they're like, yeah, they know like, yeah, this is what we should be doing.
Yep.
We should have been doing this for 20, 30 years. Everything you're telling us, we agree with. Now tell me, how are you going to do it? And then we talk about how to do it and the SEZ approach. And, you know, now there's been so much success with SEZs that you can point to, and they know that, right? And so, but a lot of countries, they're not equipped to be able to execute in the way that the UAE did or Singapore did or whatever. Because I think the truth of the matter is with state building, there is a heavy founder effect, right? One of the biggest things that some really great investors look for in startups is like, if this particular entrepreneur didn't build this particular idea, would it happen or not, right? And if it wouldn't, that's the deals you want, right? Like if, you know, this Elon type stuff, like if Elon didn't do SpaceX when he did it, would the space industry be where it is? Absolutely not. Sure. No way. There wasn't somebody else who was going to do it. That was it, right? If Steve Jobs didn't run Apple, would we have a touchscreen iPhone or other phones? I don't think so. Honestly, we probably still wouldn't have it, right? That's just like how big of a deal this is. Would Singapore be like it is without Lee Kuan Yew? Absolutely not. No way, right? Was there another person waiting to do the exact same thing? No, absolutely not, right? Same with the UAE, right? You know, with Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, like if he wasn't a visionary and didn't have the courage to do a lot of the big bets he did earlier on, no, absolutely not. He wouldn't have a UAE. So a lot of these countries, they don't have that, right? And so if you can bring that kind of like visionary execution leadership to the table, and it's aligned with what they know they should be doing, it's like, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not trying to take over your country or anything. I'm simply going to be able to execute what you guys know you should be doing. And a lot of people realize they're not equipped to execute it, right? They're smart enough to see they don't have the internal resources. They can't bring in the FDI. They don't have the capability in the government or in the industrial sectors in their country to develop themselves the way they should. And so they're happy to partner with somebody like us to do it. And so that's a big part of it. That industry master planning, I think, is the core like unlock for us.
And then saying that even more basically to another, the proposition to Sao Tome was what? To completely regenerate and create an entirely, you know, what was the proposition to the government?
Well, first and foremost, this is something I learned from Prosper, right? In a country where you're going to be able to do very high autonomy stuff, which is what Padre cares about a lot, and kind of that rubbed off on me over the years, that's a very important like foundation to this, right? We don't want to just do like a nice industrial zone that has very little autonomy. We want to be able to really innovate on governance to the point where like we don't want to have the reason I do a JV model is because I don't want to rely on the idea that taxation is the right revenue model for government. I think we should be able to innovate on that and try turning it into a SaaS model, for example. And I'm not able to do any of those experiments unless I have the freedom to do so. And why would the government allow me to possibly do that unless they were in on the upside, regardless of what happens? So I want them on my side of the table, right? So no matter how I win, they win. It doesn't matter. So that gives me the freedom to now experiment. So first of all, that was very important. And then second of all, this is only going to be possible, this kind of autonomy, in a country which is poor and underdeveloped. You're not going to get this kind of a deal done in a rich, developed country. Like, why would they ever do that? And even if it was in their interest to do it, there's so much political inertia against it, right? Like the US needs SEZs very badly. The EU needs SEZs very badly. But the economic inertia is not strong enough to overcome the political inertia, right? So even though you look around the world and see all the success of SEZs, there's just too much, political headwinds against it. So given that, if you're going to have to go to these type of countries, then you need to first of all think about what's your story for the industries that lift up the poor, right? Because that has to be your number one first diplomatic effort and the number one most important baseline, the thing that you need to do to have long-term stability. And so for Sao Tome, that's agriculture. For a lot of developing Africa, that's agriculture, right? That's the quickest way to generate a massive number of jobs that lift people up towards middle class.
What does that look like even? So the minute that's sort of like a very, lots of single families, small farms across sort of Sao Tome. I guess what's the play even in agriculture as an example? Like you're bringing sort of downstream sort of industries onshore into Sao Tome and helping them move up the economic index. What's the approach even?
So I've been into ag and sustainability for a really long time. But again, probably because of growing up in Maine, we're pretty obsessed about this stuff. Maine has no bill of wards since the 1960s. It's illegal. They had the first sustainability law in the world was in Maine in 1836 or something. It was the sustainable lobster fish. So lobster fishing in Maine has been sustainable for over 150 years. So I grew up around that type of environment, and I care about it a lot. I care about, being a good steward of the earth. And so we had seen this company called Small Farm Cities that we were that excited about and invested in from Pronomos perspective. And I ended up also getting really actively involved as an advisor to that. So we not only invested, but I really helped build the company a lot in the early days. And I learned a lot about their model and what's worked and hasn't worked and stuff like that. And it's a franchisee type model. It's where they have a big central farm and they do the processing and the sales and everything with the produce. But then they create a model for all the smaller farmers to have, to basically get a house that you finance through the small farm that you run. And instead of paying your mortgage, you just drop off a bunch of onions, right? So you're growing your onions, you drop them off, and then boom, that's your mortgage payment. And you basically earn your house that way. And then eventually you'd start building savings and wealth and equity and start, having microfinance and really build, embedded fintech into this thing. That's the direction that they're headed. In fact, we were just talking about real world asset tokenization of massive forests in southern Africa that they're starting to get some interesting deals there along these rail corridors. So you would basically get involved in doing a transatlantic railroads in Africa and financing both the building of the rail line and the preservation of all the surrounding forest and doing agroforestry and tokenizing that. And then also building these small farm cities all along it. And we would be involved alpha in building the industrial cities, right? So these big EV cities and stuff like that use all the minerals and build the big high value industry stuff. So I love those guys. I work with them all the time. I've learned an enormous amount from them. And we decided, okay, let's use a very similar model in Sao Tome. They used to have these huge coffee and cacao estates. And so we're taking them over. And we're doing the same thing where there's a centralized estate that will be huge and people will have jobs on the estate, right, where they're paid normal salary. But then we're also building these small farm villages around so that place they live is in their own home that they own and they have their own small farm attached to that. So now they have a whole second income stream. So it allows them to kind of turbocharge building wealth and growing up into middle class. And we'll do the schools, we'll do the clinics, we'll do the hospitals, everything. So it's really building a modern civilization from nothing, right? Because right now they're living in really abject poverty. Most of them are squatting in the decaying former slave quarters of these old plantations. It's incredibly sad when you see it. So it actually, feels very good as well. The cool thing about what we're doing is it's like a dual track mission where you can feel good about the top-down mission of like fixing governance and trying to innovate and dealing with what we've seen as being so broken in the West. Sure. And then you have the bottom-up mission of basically lifting millions of people out of poverty. It's like, it's hard to not wake up and feel super inspired.
Yeah, it is.
So no matter how much political bullshit I deal with, and I feel some days like just giving up, it's easy to fall back onto the mission and feel like it just gives you this energy to push through. So yeah, it's about agriculture, and it's about this, centralized estates that could do all the processing, because, for coffee and cacao, you need, pretty reasonable investments for doing, modern state-of-the-art industrial processing and having top quality products. Sao Tome has been known for a very long time as a top tier producer, especially for cacao. It used to be for coffee, although the quality has fallen by the wayside a little bit. So it's going to take us a bit more time to revitalize the coffee industry there. But we'll basically have ultra premium, extremely expensive coffee and cacao from Sao Tome, and we'll sell that into the international markets. And we'll try to not sell the raw material outside, so that people are roasting it outside, or people are, making the chocolate in Paris. Right now, there's a French conglomerate that operates at Sao Tome, for example, that started a little co-op program where some of the locals are doing very, very small scale cacao harvesting just out of the forest. I wouldn't even call it farming. It's more like harvesting of like legacy cacao trees just growing out in the forest. Yeah. And they just grab it. And it's like, obviously it's pure organic. It's like the ultimate organic cacao. It's like insane. And so then they take it, do some very basic processing and send it off to France. And then they're making like super bougie chocolate in France and selling it for a fortune.
Yep.
Well, we want to make the chocolate on the island, and now you have more and more, So it's again pulling the whole value chain into these countries that have the resources. So the wealth and equity value and entrepreneurship, the opportunities and everything accrues to that country.
Yep.
Instead of to these old European colonial powers or the US or China or whatever, which is what's happening there.
So it's a pretty comprehensive sort of like economic development package, which is targeted at the citizenry that's already there. I guess this is an important part, right, Alpha, right? So these are all typically greenfield sites. You're actually like inheriting almost like an existing population, and you're designing plans specifically for those people.
Right.
Those,
It's a mixed bag. Some of them are super greenfield. Like in Cabo Verdes, for example, it's super greenfield. It's all completely greenfield. So it's kind of like, you have to be very opportunistic and look at everything on a case-by-case basis. You have to have playbooks for things so that some things are repeatable, but the circumstances surrounding each different country and plot of land and industry and populations that's there varies wildly. So you have to have the savvy to come in and really spend time there on the ground, look at it, learn it, internalize what's going on, and think about how to solve for the real on-the-ground reality.
But the scale's quite big, so even like the Sao Tome, right? The scale of this is quite big. Do you have any sort of...
Yeah. We always target to have 100 square kilometers minimum for each city. In Sao Tome, that's pretty substantial because the country is only 1,000 square kilometers, so it'll be 10% the country.
Of course, that is big.
Yeah.
For context, Forest City is like 5 square kilometers at the minute. We're planning to go up to 20 square kilometers, right? So as a minimum 20 times larger than Forest City, which Forest City's bet at the minute to be able to house like 150,000 people, maybe 700,000 people at the 20 kilometer scale, right? So 100 kilometers is like a lot. It's space to put it that way.
But and the reason, there's a very strong rationale behind that. So I spent a bunch of time with Rendeavor on this, and some other kind of big land development guys. Especially, there's another friend of mine who helped develop a bunch of Hong Kong back in the day. And one of the things I learned is that there's a super high activation cost for these projects. Like the lead time to do all this political work and deal making and stuff it's a couple of years. It's a lot of time and energy and money. And then you have the infrastructure, you have power, you have water, you have roads, you have all this stuff. It's a lot that goes into it. And so if you want to invest all this, well, the more land you have, the better the justification is, the better the ROI on all these infrastructure investments. And if you size it too small, you end up really kind of hurting yourself a lot because you're putting so much money into activating your project.
Yeah.
And then you have a limited upside because you have a limited space. So they pushed me really hard, like go big, be very aggressive. And I was much more conservative at the beginning. And I was frankly scared to go ask for this amount of land at the beginning. I was like, are you sure? Like, this is a plot of land, dude. It was like, but I did it, and we get it in chunks though, right? So the way we do it is we have the JV agreement, and we can just attach concession schedules to the agreement.
Yeah.
So we can get it, I can get 500 hectares here, 1,000 hectares here, and just piece it together. We want it to be contiguous as much as possible, but we're okay with it coming in incrementally. That makes it practical because we want to move fast. I don't want 5 years so that I can pick exactly the amount of space. I'd rather get 500 hectares in year one and execute and build momentum.
Sure.
And then have the next 1,000 and then have the next 1,000. And you're building political goodwill the whole time. So people are more and more wanting to give you more land and more projects to take on.
Which is crazy, right? And again, like you talk about even like the moving trepidation about the scale within a particular region, but actually you've gone multi-region like from the beginning, right? Because again, the first MOU was Autonomy, but it had Cape Verde, there's other Lusophone, and now already Anglophone. That come right. So like, what was the thought or the strategy around just like, basically rolling up several of these to start executing simultaneously?
Yeah, a lot of people have questioned that. So the thing is, what I've learned from deep tech and big like enterprise stuff is that when you have projects that have inherently long lead times, you need to be incredibly thoughtful about how you parallel path stuff. Because if everything has serial, it's never going to happen.
Yep.
So you have to be really like intensely focus on attention to detail, systems thinking, decomposing things, parallel pathing things. And so it's like, okay, if a city is going to take me 30 or 50 years to build, right? I'm a 45-year-old guy right now. I know I only look 25, but I actually am 45, believe it or not. So I don't have 50 years and then another 50 years and another. Maybe if Brian Johnson and these longevity guys figure this shit out, makes a rust being, and maybe I do have 200 years. But I'm trying to assume maybe I don't, right?
Yep.
So if that's the case, like I want to get a bunch of them going in parallel,
Yep.
because once I die, the thing will already be going, and
Yep.
it won't be that it just gets frozen in time. You know what? A quick aside to that. Disney World in Florida, a lot of people don't know, was actually going to be the first private city, the first modern private city on Earth that Walt Disney had envisioned back in the 60s before he passed away. And unfortunately, he passed on before they had started the project. So they had everything secured. They had the deal with Florida. Everything was ready to go. But with the founder Dependency, without Walt, they just fell back to doing another theme park. So it's pretty cool still, but it was called Epcot. So Epcot was supposed to be a big privately run city. It was supposed to be a futuristic city full of people with high ambition, doing the most innovative stuff around the world. That's why they did monorail and all this really cool stuff like way back in the 60s. If that's the reality, or look at Apple, right? Where's the awesome new products that Steve Spinoff, right?
Something like
It's like, so it's like I want to do as much as I can before I get hit by a truck or whatever the fuck happens. Because then it's like it's not going to be hard. It's not going to be easy for somebody else to keep innovating like this. So I want to get it going. And then there's another reason too, is like you need to have opportunity costs to allow yourself to apply pressure to people. So government, one, tries to do shenanigans and drag things out or make weird demands. Well, I'm just going to government too then. They're ready to go, right? And so I can play these guys off of each other and stop people from engaging in bad behaviors that either drag deals out or try to put onerous terms in there or whatever that hamper the progress. So there's many reasons why this parallel pathing, I think, makes a lot of sense. Again, I don't think it would suit everyone, because I think this is, again, why we wanted me to do this, because I think building startup cities is very hard. I've built a lot of different kinds of startups, and this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I don't think it's something that I would take on as a junior entrepreneur with pretty limited amount of experience.
What's the hard part about this? The hard parts?
There's so much as far. I think the problem is there's many pieces which are each hard. It's not like there's one hardcore show. You know, the government stuff is hard. Thinking about all the industrial mapping and bringing in industry partners, that's hard. The community building and marketing to be able to get people to go there, that's hard. Marshaling support from the locals and developing, you know, the industries that lift them out of poverty into a good place, that's hard. So you're taking on, you know, probably a dozen really hard problems that Gerald out. And I just don't think it's like, if I had tried to do this as my first company, remembering how incompetent I was as an entrepreneur in my first company, no way, like no way. So I do think that I benefit from being a pretty well-seasoned entrepreneur to do this. And if it wasn't for that, then I probably would not try to do this approach. So I don't think like everyone should try this. I think there's different ways to come into the market, right? Like Balaji's a big at espousing this community first type model. And I think that's a great model too. And we may see some big wins from that as well, where people start more from a community building or crypto type approach and then figure out how to land it somewhere and expand from there. So that may work and be another approach. And that may be more well suited to folks that don't have a ton of experience dealing with big, complex organizations, right? Because it's hard. It's just hard doing that.
So where's the offer today? What's going on right now? What does the next 3 months look like?
Now we have to raise a lot of money really fast. That's what Padre and I are focused on right now.
And this is because these deals are done.
It's time to start building. So it's time to come out of stealth and start building, sir. So Q4 and Q1 is all it's going to be about. You know, marketing, community building, getting on podcasts, getting press going, getting people to understand and know what we're doing, and raising a boatload of capital to start doing these activation projects. And then we can and start bringing in anchor partners that are going to bring more capital and more execution firepower. One of the things with these projects is that you can't and don't want to build it all yourself, but you also can't partner it all out, right? You need to have a mix, because let's say, for example, in Cabo Verde, we want to get a good hospitality ecosystem going, right? We're not, from day one, I'm not going to be able to sign up the Four Seasons and the Ritz and Six Senses and all these guys to come build, right? I'm going to have to activate it. I'm going to have to build some resorts and stuff initially and show that the numbers work, right? Okay, this is going to pencil out. If you guys come and do one, you know, it's going to work. And so we've got to be able to raise capital that allow us to do a certain number of activation projects that help us sell and bring other partners in to increase the momentum, right? So we have to focus again on both of those kind of in parallel. So we'll be fundraising for the global top co, while we're also fundraising for specific country co's, while we're also fundraising for specific project financing. So you have 3 levels in hierarchy at the same time.
How big's the team in a minute, Bradford?
It's like 35.
Okay, it's good.
Yeah. I've built the whole entire team in Lagos, Nigeria. I have a bunch of experience working around the world, and like I wanted to keep the burn very low in the first stage. And I also wanted to use African talent as much as possible for obvious reasons. And I think, you know, Lagos and Nigeria in general is, you know, they're super smart. They're really hungry. And Lagos especially is a city that's really, like, they hustle, they grind, they want to rise up. So it's got the right vibe. It's got the right DNA. And so I've built the whole team out there, which has allowed us to keep the burn a lot lower. The other thing I would say is, because, you know, we use AI obviously all the time, fish ground up. Having been somebody that's worked on it for 20 years, I've baked it into everything we do super deeply. So we have an architecture team of 5 guys, and I hired the whole team based on people that were like kind of on the cutting edge of using the AI tools.
Yes.
And so we punch way above our weight class with architecture, because that's something that we needed to do in the early process, right? So if you think about it, to unlock it, we needed to be good at architecture, good at design, good at legal, and good at government BT. right? Because when we're getting the governments on board, we got to show them the vision. Look at all this cool shit we're going to build. And if it's in beautiful slide decks and the architecture is amazing, then it's like, whoa, these guys aren't messing around, right? This stuff looks like it was done by Foster, one of these other top firms. Looks like we paid $3 million for it. But it's just, again, me with my thing, using the AI tools, and then 5, guys in Lagos, Nigeria that can also use the tools, and then boom, we can do these type of things. So I do think that the timing with both the text and image and video sort of trifecta has really accelerated us a lot, and that's allowed me to keep the head count down a lot as well.
And the point is, by building this experiment, you're also putting that pressure on them.
Yeah.
So also up their games. Again, so you're helping both of us at the same time.
Yeah,
But,
exactly.
but Bradford, thank you so much for coming and having a chat, speaking to us a little bit more about Alpha. What's the best way for people to stay in contact or to follow Alpha's journey?
You can find all of our socials. I had it on my slide at the end of Network State. If you just look us up, it's Alpha City IO online, and you can find our Twitter, you can find our LinkedIn, you can find our IG. We've already been doing some content, but that's going to ramp a lot. So over the course of the next few months, there's going to start being a ton of video content. These guys right here are trying to make some video content out of this chat. So it's already started.
When is it? When's the first?
Hopefully next year we're gonna start doing pop-up type stuff. That's what I have to admit. When the pop-up city stuff first started, I really thought it was a stupid idea.
Sure.
I'm gonna be honest.
Good.
I was like, this is bullshit. This is like a glorified conference. Nothing is gonna ever come of this. And then I went to the first event that Nicholas did.
Sure.
Prior to the Infinita, it was Fatality.
Exactly.
And I went to the first one of those. And I was like, this is very interesting, actually, because Prosper had done this deal to acquire the resort.
Sure.
And Nicholas had done all this great work to get a lot of community momentum going with Vitalia. You could come and you could kind of get a feel for what it would be like and what would be possible. And I was like, this is actually pretty cool. If you can come and get people to come for a conference, and then get them to come for a pop-up and stay as long as they can, right? And it's sort of a gradual onboarding into getting people to move to a new place, right? And it's convincing people, especially at the pioneer phase, at the early phase, selling them to come to this crazy remote location that's totally different. It's not easy to do, right? And so I think the pop-up model is very smart in that sense. It's a go-to-market strategy, right? So yeah, the first thing we're gonna try to do is build resorts and build living quarters, and then start having these type of events with different industry focuses that make sense for the place, right? So if it's a crypto city on an island, let's do crypto events, right? If it's an EV city, and we're talking about working with critical minerals and processing them into products, let's do big events around EVs and battery tech and stuff like that, right? And get the people to come and see there, hang out, and then gradually you'll be able to sell people into living there. And you can also do the customer development, because you could just ask them point blank, what would it take to get you to move here? Sure. What's missing, right? What sucks about this? What would make it awesome for you? And then you could keep improving and improving. And so I think we'll start doing the pop-up stuff really soon, as soon as we start getting things up. So next year, for sure, we'll start running pop-ups. The question of what quarter, I don't know yet. It'll definitely be the back half of the year, though. We need 6 months to start building.
So maybe it's straight from Network State Conference next year to Sao Tome or something.
Could be. Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's say maybe it's that. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I think that communism is a great experiment, and it was good to try it. The engineering is only one part of the problem. Tried to go to Malaysia first, picked London and their financial laws. And so they forked that code base. I think of governments as a cartel. Every dollar of economic activity in the UAE is in some kind of special economic zone. Charter cities have lifted more people out of poverty. Honduras is actually being sued by more companies than any country in the world right now because Castro is a Marxist. So fundamental to all cross-border investment that even their new commie friends are like, but you don't get the money if you're not in one of these.